Identical Chinese twins sold like sheep on Christmas until a gunslinger said, "I'll take you home." On a quiet Christmas morning in the late 1800s, the small frontier town lay under a soft blanket of snow that looked like powdered sugar sprinkled over rooftops, fences, and horse wagons. The sky was pale, as if the sun was still trying to decide whether it should rise or sleep a bit longer. The cold air smelled of pine wood and fresh frost, and the whole world felt calm and still, except for the gentle ringing of church bells echoing in the distance. Most people were indoors, warming their hands around cups of tea or preparing simple holiday meals. But near the old wooden docks, a different kind of morning was taking shape, one that very few people had expected. A group of townsfolk began gathering slowly, brought by whispers that something unusual had been found near the shore during sunrise. A pair of fishermen had been the first to notice it. They were tying their small boats after returning from checking nets when they heard the faint sound of crying carried by the wind. At first, they thought it was the call of a bird, maybe a seagull. But the longer they listened, the more certain they became that the sound was human, a tiny, trembling cry that seemed too soft to belong to anything larger than a newborn. Curious and concerned, they followed the sound to a stack of crates that had been left behind by a trading vessel the night before. Nobody had paid much attention to the crates earlier. The docks often held leftover goods, old barrels, and stray bundles, especially during the holiday rush. But this morning, something was different. Something small was moving inside one of the open baskets. When the fishermen pushed aside a loose piece of cloth, they gasped. Inside the basket lay two tiny baby girls, identical in every feature. Their cheeks were soft and round, their skin pale from the cold air. Their dark eyes were watery, and their little hands trembled as they reached out blindly for warmth. The babies were wrapped in thin, worn cloth that offered almost no protection from the winter air. The fishermen looked at each other in shock. They had never seen identical twins before, and certainly not babies who appeared so young, so small, and so alone. Without wasting another moment, they lifted the basket and carried it toward the main area of the docks, hoping someone might know what to do. Word spread quickly across town. People who had just begun cooking breakfast or stepping out to feed their horses found themselves drawn toward the docks. Even children tugged at their mothers' coats, begging to see what everyone was talking about. Soon, a loose circle of townspeople surrounded the basket, whispering and murmuring as the twins' soft cries filled the cold morning air. Many people stared in disbelief. They had seen travelers from many places, but the babies' delicate facial features and smooth black hair made it clear that the twins were not from the local community. Their sudden appearance left everyone confused. How had the girls arrived? Who had brought them? Why would anyone leave two newborns on a winter morning? Among the crowd, some faces showed worry and sympathy. A few women stepped forward, gently tucking the cloth tighter around the infants to shield them from the cold. One elderly man bent down to look more closely, shaking his head in bewilderment. "They must have come on that merchant ship last night," someone whispered. "That ship left before sunrise," another replied. "No one saw babies on board," said a third. "Maybe the captain didn't know." Every person had a theory, but none of them brought real answers. The babies, however, did not care about the conversations around them. They only knew the cold air brushing their cheeks, the strange voices above their heads, and the emptiness in their tiny stomachs. When one cried, the other followed, as if their hearts were linked in the same rhythm. A man known as Mr. Dalton, who often organized public matters around town, eventually walked forward. He wasn't a mean man, nor a particularly kind one. He simply did what he believed was practical. He studied the twins with an unreadable expression. "We can't leave them here," he said. "Someone must take responsibility." The statement was true, but it brought no solution. The town was small, and most families already struggled to care for their own children. The winter months were especially difficult, with limited food and supplies. Everyone knew raising one baby took great effort. Raising twins was even more challenging. Still, the townspeople lingered. Something about the babies made it hard for anyone to walk away. They were so tiny, so delicate, and so unaware of the world they had arrived in. Their dark eyes fluttered open every few moments, scanning the faces above them as though searching for the one person who belonged to them. A woman stepped forward, placing her hand gently on the side of the basket. She was Mrs. Harper, a middle-aged widow who taught children how to read. Her heart softened at the sight of the little girls. "They shouldn't stay out here in the cold," she said quietly. "Not on Christmas of all days. It's supposed to be a day of kindness." Several people nodded, but others hesitated. Kindness was important, but so was survival. In a simple frontier town, resources were limited. Every decision carried weight. Snowflakes began to drift from the sky, landing softly on the baby's blankets. Mrs. Harper brushed them away, humming softly in an attempt to calm the girls. The humming helped for a moment. The twins stared at her wide-eyed, their tiny breaths making small clouds in the frosty air. Mr. Dalton cleared his throat. "We will need to find a home for them today." Some families felt compassion but knew they could not take on two newborns. Others stepped backward quietly, unwilling to be asked directly. The babies began to fuss again. Their soft cries tugged at the hearts of several onlookers, but still no one came forward to adopt them. A few men suggested they should take the babies to the church, hoping the pastor would know what to do. Others proposed asking nearby towns if any families needed a child. But even these ideas were uncertain. Traveling in snow was risky, and the pastor was away visiting relatives. Despite the uncertainty, one thing remained clear. The twins needed warmth, food, and care, and they needed it soon. A gentle breeze blew across the docks, lifting the edge of the blanket. A woman quickly tucked it back around the infant's feet, noticing for the first time that one of the babies had a tiny birthmark shaped like a petal near her ankle. The other twin had the same mark, only slightly smaller. It made them even more identical, like two matching snowflakes created from the same cloud. Someone finally asked, "Do they have names?" No one knew. The babies had no letters, no tags, nothing that could tell their story. They were simply two little girls who had arrived in the world without a voice to speak for them. Mrs. Harper wiped a tear from her eye. "They need names," she whispered. "Even if their futures are uncertain, they should at least be called something kind." A few people agreed softly. Naming the babies felt like a gentle act, something small but meaningful. After a moment, Mrs. Harper looked down at them and smiled warmly. "They look like May and Lynn," she said. "Two names that sound like they belong together." The twins blinked up at her as though accepting the names without question. Even with names, the problem remained. Who would take them home? The crowd grew restless. People shifted their weight from one foot to the other, torn between empathy and practicality. Snow continued to fall, and the twins' breaths grew softer, the sign of growing cold. Mrs. Harper offered to hold the babies for warmth. She reached into the basket, lifting one gently, then the other. The moment they settled into her arms, they stopped crying. Their tiny faces relaxed, and one twin grasped her scarf with her small fingers, as if sensing safety for the first time that morning. The sight warmed many hearts. For a moment, the entire crowd quieted, watching as the tiny girls breathed peacefully against the woman's chest. But Mrs. Harper knew she could not keep them. She lived alone in a small cottage with barely enough income from teaching. Caring for twins required milk, blankets, and constant attention, things she could not provide on her own. She looked at the babies lovingly before admitting, "I wish I could take them. I truly do, but I wouldn't be able to give them what they need." No one blamed her. They only watched as she gently placed May and Lynn back into the basket, smoothing their blankets with care. The sun had finally begun to rise, casting a warmer glow on the gathering. Christmas morning was supposed to be peaceful, filled with greetings and simple gifts. Instead, the town stood huddled together, facing a question that seemed too heavy for such a gentle day. As more people joined the gathering, the crowd grew larger, but still no one stepped forward to offer a home. The twins were adorable, but also a responsibility many feared they could not meet. And yet, everyone felt drawn to them, unable to completely turn away. The twins blinked sleepily as the warmth of the rising sun touched their faces. Their breath steadied. Their small bodies relaxed. They were too young to understand anything happening around them. All they knew were soft cloth, cold air, and the strange new world waiting for them. The town did not yet realize that this Christmas morning, this moment on the docks, would be remembered for years to come. Not because of the confusion or the uncertainty, but because two newborn girls had arrived quietly, innocently, bringing with them a question that would soon change someone's life forever. For now, the townspeople waited and murmured, unsure of what would happen next. The babies slept in their basket, wrapped in thin cloth, unaware that their future was hanging in the balance. They did not know that soon someone unexpected would appear, someone who would walk into their story like a warm light entering a cold room, someone who would look at them not with curiosity but with calm, steady kindness. But at this quiet moment, with snow falling slowly and the sky brightening gently, the world seemed to pause for them. Two tiny girls named May and Lynn, whose journey had only just begun. The sun had risen higher by the time the townspeople gathered more tightly around the old wooden platform near the docks. The Christmas air still held a touch of cold, but warmer light now rested on everyone's faces. Even so, the situation felt no clearer than it had been an hour ago. The twins, May and Lynn, had dozed off again, their tiny chests rising and falling with soft, steady breaths. For a moment, everything seemed peaceful, but the crowd's uncertain whispers slowly returned. Mr. Dalton, noticing the increasing number of people, stepped onto the platform with an air of authority. He wasn't the kind of man who liked confusion, especially not on a holiday morning. He rubbed his hands together, trying to warm them while thinking of the best thing to do. He glanced at the twins and then at the crowd. "Someone must take responsibility," he repeated, this time more firmly, hoping someone would respond. Several new faces in the crowd leaned forward to see the babies better. Many of them had been drawn by the news traveling through town. Two identical baby girls found on Christmas morning. Some thought it was a blessing, others thought it was a puzzle, and some simply wanted to see with their own eyes what everyone was talking about. A group of ranch hands who had come into town earlier to buy supplies also wandered closer. They were not unkind men, just simple workers who didn't often meet strangers, much less newborn twins wrapped in cloth. They stared with curious expressions, whispering to one another about how unusual it was to see identical little ones. One of the men, younger and more soft-hearted than he appeared, leaned closer and said, "They look so peaceful, like two tiny snowbirds." A few children squeezed through the legs of adults to get a better look. One little girl with red mittens pressed her hands together and gasped quietly. "They're so small," she whispered to her mother, "like little dolls." Her mother nodded and gently guided her back so she wouldn't step too close to the platform. The basket holding the twins sat on a clean blanket someone had spread earlier. The cloth inside it was simple, lightly worn, and clearly not enough for such cold weather. A woman from the bakery hurried back to her shop and returned with a warm loaf of bread wrapped in cloth. Though the twins couldn't eat it, she placed the warm bundle near them to spread some heat in their direction. Another woman removed her soft shawl and draped it around the basket to keep them cozy. The kindness of strangers filled the chilly air with a warm feeling. Even though the townspeople didn't know what to do, they felt a gentle responsibility simply because the babies were there, needing care and warmth. Mr. Dalton took a slow breath. "We cannot leave them outside any longer," he said. "We must find someone who can give them a home. A real home, but it must be someone who has enough to offer." He didn't mean money, not completely. He meant time, patience, safety, and love, the things all children deserved. But even those things could be hard to give in a small frontier town where food had to be earned through long hours, and every winter day brought new challenges. A quiet conversation spread through the crowd. People spoke softly, careful not to wake the sleeping infants. Some wondered if a family from nearby farms might take them in. Others thought the church community might help, even though the pastor wasn't in town. A few said maybe they should send word to a larger town where more people lived, and where someone might be searching for children to raise. But none of these ideas could be acted upon quickly. Snowy roads, long distances, and the uncertainty of the twins' origins made every suggestion feel slow and unsure. Time felt heavy, and the babies needed immediate care. Mr. Dalton looked over the crowd and raised his voice just a little. "Anyone willing to take them? Even for a short time?" His tone wasn't demanding, only hopeful. A couple exchanged glances but looked down at their worn coats, knowing they barely had enough to get through the season. Another woman, already caring for 4 toddlers, sighed with sympathy but shook her head. "They're beautiful," she murmured, "but I couldn't keep up." Many people stepped back a little, not because they disliked the babies, but because they feared they wouldn't be able to give them what they truly needed. The ranch hands whispered again among themselves. One of them said, "It's like the whole town is trying to decide the future of 2 tiny angels." Another nodded thoughtfully, brushing snow off his hat. They meant no harm, but they knew the ranch life meant long days, unpredictable weather, and little time to care for newborns. Meanwhile, the twins shifted slightly in their sleep, their matching expressions softening as if they were dreaming of someplace warm. Their peacefulness made the crowd fall silent again, even if just for a moment. A man named Mr. Clay, who ran a small storage warehouse, stepped forward with a thoughtful look. He didn't plan to take the babies, but he wanted to help the crowd understand. "These children came into our town unexpectedly," he said. "We don't know where they're from or what brought them here. But they're here now, and right now they need gentleness more than anything." His words softened the expressions of many. They looked at the twins with new eyes, not as a mystery to solve, but as two little girls who had been given to the town by fate itself. One woman sighed deeply. "If only we knew something about their family," she said. "It feels wrong not knowing anything at all." Another woman replied kindly, "Sometimes family isn't found in history. Sometimes it's found in the present moment when someone chooses to care." Her words lingered warmly in the air. A few people began discussing practical ideas. Someone suggested sending a message to the sheriff in a neighboring town to ask for guidance. Another said they could bring the babies to the town hall to keep them warm until a decision was made. But each suggestion came with new concerns. Who would feed them? Who would stay with them? Who would make sure they didn't spend too long in the cold? The bakery woman, still standing close to the basket, looked around with worried eyes. "I can hold them for a little while," she offered. "Maybe walk them near the fire in my shop so they stay warm." She paused. "But I don't have the space to keep them for long." Her offer was kind, but temporary. Still, Mr. Dalton nodded. "That may help," he admitted. Just then, one of the twins stirred, stretching her tiny hand upward as though trying to grasp a snowflake drifting down from the sky. A few gasps of admiration rose from the crowd. Even the coldest morning seemed brighter when a newborn reached for something softly and innocently. A child nearby whispered, "They're like magic." Someone else laughed gently. "No magic, just little ones who need love." Slowly, a small group of women stepped forward. They gathered around the basket, speaking softly to one another. They discussed how they might take turns caring for the twins until a permanent solution was found. One could offer warm milk. Another could provide extra cloth. A third could help keep watch during the night. The idea was kind and practical, but even they seemed unsure. "What if no one steps forward to take them fully?" one of the women asked quietly. "We can help for a while, yes, but these babies deserve someone who will stay forever." Her question settled like a thin layer of snow over the crowd, light, gentle, but impossible to ignore. Mrs. Harper, still watching from the side, smiled sadly. "I wish I could keep them," she said again, mostly to herself. "They feel like blessings." She gently brushed her fingers along the blanket and whispered, "You sweet girls deserve so much." Though she spoke softly, several people heard her. Her tenderness made others reflect on their own feelings. Some hearts wished they could take the twins home too, but life in a frontier town was rarely easy. Many worked from dawn until dusk, and many struggled simply to keep their families fed. Still, the babies continued to draw attention. Their identical little faces, the way their fingers curled gently in their sleep, the soft sighs they made, it was all enough to make even the busiest hearts pause. Mr. Dalton looked at the crowd again, unsure of how to move forward. He didn't want to pressure anyone, yet he needed to guide the situation toward a safe, caring answer. After all, the twins could not remain outdoors all day. The snow was light now, but it might fall harder the next hour. He cleared his throat and spoke again. "We will keep looking," he said. "Surely someone will be able to care for them. Maybe someone traveling through town will stop by. Maybe someone with a larger home or someone who has always wished for children." The crowd nodded slowly, though no one was sure who that someone might be. For a moment, silence returned. The church bells in the distance rang again, soft and peaceful. A gentle wind moved the shawl wrapped around the basket. The smell of warm bread drifted through the chilly air from the bakery nearby. The twins slept on, unaware that the entire town was quietly discussing their future as if it were the most important decision of the day. And perhaps, in a way, it was. The people did not know it yet, but the answer they were searching for, the person they hoped would step forward, was on his way. Somewhere on the other side of town, a quiet traveler with a calm heart and thoughtful soul was making his morning walk toward the docks. He knew nothing about the twins, the crowd, or the confusion waiting in the cold air. His steps were slow but steady, guided by a sense of kindness he carried everywhere he went. Before long, he would arrive and everything would begin to change. But for now, the crowd waited, bundled in coats and scarves, hoping for a gentle solution. The babies slept peacefully, wrapped in borrowed warmth. And the Christmas morning, though uncertain, remained filled with the soft glow of hope. Caleb Mercer walked quietly down the snowy main road of the small frontier town, unaware that his footsteps were carrying him toward a moment that would shape the rest of his life. He had arrived the night before, just as most people were settling into their homes for Christmas Eve. The journey had been long, and the cold had settled deep into his bones, but Caleb was a man who rarely complained. He simply wrapped his coat tighter, exhaled softly into the chilled air, and continued forward with his usual steady calmness. He was not a man who enjoyed crowds. He preferred quiet paths, early mornings, and peaceful evenings spent by a fire. His life had been filled with movement, town to town, ranch to ranch, yet no place had ever felt like home. He always told himself he didn't need much, just a roof for the night, a warm drink, and a bit of quiet. But something in his heart had felt heavy lately, as if he were missing something important, something he couldn't name. Perhaps it was the holiday spirit in the air. Perhaps it was the soft way snow fell over the little wooden houses. Or perhaps it was simply time for a change, even if he didn't know what that change would be. As he walked past the bakery, he noticed a group of people gathered near the docks. It wasn't unusual for folks to gather on holidays, but this crowd looked different. Their faces were thoughtful, their voices soft, and many were leaning forward as though trying to see something small. Curious but calm, Caleb approached slowly. He didn't push through the crowd or call attention to himself. He simply stopped at a polite distance, watching quietly until a woman near him noticed him. "You're new here," she said kindly, adjusting the shawl on her shoulders. "Just passing through?" Caleb nodded. "That's right, I didn't mean to intrude, just wondered what's happening." Her eyes softened as she glanced back toward the center of the crowd. "Two tiny babies were found on the docks this morning," she explained. "Identical twins, they were alone, wrapped in thin cloth. We're trying to find someone who can care for them." Caleb felt a gentle tug in his chest. He didn't react outwardly, but something warm settled into his thoughts like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Twins?" he asked softly. "Yes," the woman said. "They're sleeping now. Everyone's been trying to figure out what to do." Her voice carried a mixture of worry and hope, a sound Caleb had heard many times in towns facing unexpected troubles. But this wasn't a problem of danger or hardship. This was something delicate, something innocent. Caleb stayed where he was for another moment, listening to the quiet hum of conversation, the soft sigh of wind moving across the snow, and the distant ring of holiday bells from the church. Then, without rushing, he stepped closer. As he moved through the crowd, people naturally made space for him. He wasn't intimidating, but there was something about his presence, calm, steady, patient, that made others step aside easily. Some nodded in greeting, he nodded back politely. Near the center of the gathering, he finally saw them. Two tiny baby girls, asleep in a small basket lined with borrowed blankets. Their faces were peaceful, with soft, round cheeks and little hands curled gently near their chins. Their hair was dark and silky, their breaths quiet enough that he had to lean slightly to hear the faint sound they made. Caleb's heart gave a slow, unexpected ache, not of sadness, but of something tender he couldn't explain. He had seen many things in life, but he had never seen a sight so gentle and so full of innocence. Mrs. Harper, who had held the twins earlier, noticed him studying the babies. She stepped forward with a warm but worried look. "They were found alone this morning," she said softly. "No one knows where they came from." Caleb lowered himself slightly to get a closer look, careful not to disturb them. "They look peaceful," he murmured. "They are," Mrs. Harper agreed, "but they need someone. Someone who can take them home, someone who has enough to give them the care they deserve." Caleb didn't answer right away. He simply watched the babies, feeling something shift deeply inside him, something gentle, something long dormant. He couldn't name the feeling, but it made him pause longer than he had paused for anything in years. Mr. Dalton approached, clear and practical as always. "Are you interested in helping, sir?" he asked respectfully. "We're trying to find someone who can take responsibility, even if it's only temporary." Caleb finally stood upright again, brushing a bit of snow from his coat sleeve. "I don't know anything about caring for children," he admitted quietly, "and I don't have much of a home." "You're not alone in that," someone in the crowd said with a small laugh of understanding. "None of us have much." That comment earned a few soft chuckles, easing the tension. Caleb smiled faintly, then looked back at the twins. They were still sleeping, their breaths rising and falling in perfect unison. It amazed him how peaceful they looked despite everything they had been through, even though he didn't know exactly what that was. He looked at Mrs. Harper and the others. "Has anyone come forward to take them?" A gentle sadness passed through the crowd as people shook their heads. "Many want to help," Mrs. Harper said, "but caring for two newborns is a lot for most families here. It takes time, supplies, warmth, and food." Everyone stretched thin this winter. Caleb understood. He had lived long enough in small towns to know how hard winters could be. But the thought of the twins going without a home, of them feeling cold, lonely, or uncertain, settled heavily in his chest. The bakery woman stepped close, holding a warm cloth bundle. "They're lovely babies," she said with a heartfelt smile. "Whoever takes them will be blessed." Blessed. That word lingered in Caleb's thoughts. He hadn't felt blessed in a long time. Most days he felt like someone drifting from place to place without a reason to stay. But now, as he watched the twins breathe softly, their tiny faces glowing in the soft sunlight, he felt something warm unravel inside him, like melted snow dripping from a branch. He spoke before he even realized the words were leaving his mouth. "May I hold one?" The question brought an immediate hush over the crowd. Not a surprised hush, but a hopeful one, as if people sensed something important was about to happen. Mrs. Harper's face brightened with gentle approval. "Of course," she said softly. "Let me help." She reached into the basket and carefully lifted one of the twins, May. The baby stirred slightly, her small lips fluttering, but she did not cry. Mrs. Harper placed her gently into Caleb's arms. The moment May settled against him, Caleb felt a warmth unlike anything he had known in years. The baby was fragile, light as a feather, yet she filled his arms completely, as though she belonged there. Caleb held her carefully, supporting her with steady hands. He watched her tiny eyelids flutter open just enough to reveal dark, soft eyes that looked up at him for the briefest moment. Something inside him broke open, not in pain, but in pure, quiet tenderness. He looked down at May, and she blinked once more before drifting back to sleep, her cheek resting gently against his coat. The warmth of her little body spread into him like a soft glow. Mrs. Harper watched him with eyes that sparkled knowingly. "You're gentle with her," she said. "Babies can sense that." Caleb didn't answer. He didn't know what to say. He simply held May, feeling as though the entire world had narrowed down to the tiny weight in his arms and the soft breath against his chest. Someone nearby whispered, "Look at him, the little one likes him." Another person said quietly, "Maybe this is meant to be." Caleb heard the whispers but didn't react. He looked at the other twin, Lynn, sleeping peacefully beside her sister's empty space in the basket. Something tugged at him again, stronger this time. He didn't want them separated, not ever. He lifted his eyes to Mrs. Harper, his voice soft but certain. "Can I hold the other one too?" Her breath caught, filled with hope. "Yes," she said gently. She lifted Lynn with the same care and placed her in Caleb's free arm. Now both twins rested against him, one on each side, their tiny heads nestled peacefully against his chest. Caleb felt their warmth, their softness, their quiet breaths. He had never held anything so delicate, so trusting, so pure. And something inside him made a quiet decision. He didn't announce it immediately. He simply held the babies, feeling the truth settle naturally in his heart. After a long moment, he looked at the crowd and said in a calm and steady voice, "I can take them home." The words were simple, not dramatic, not loud, but they carried weight, soft, gentle, powerful weight. The crowd fell completely silent. Some people gasped softly, others covered their mouths in surprise, and a few smiled with tears welling in their eyes. Caleb looked down at the twins, then back at the townspeople. "I don't know what the future will look like," he admitted honestly, "but I can keep them warm. I can give them a safe place," and he paused, glancing at the tiny faces pressed peacefully against his coat. "And I can give them love." Mrs. Harper placed her hand over her heart. "Then you're the one they've been waiting for." The bakery woman wiped a tear from her cheek. "A Christmas blessing," she whispered. Even Mr. Dalton, practical, stern, and steady, felt his face soften. "If you're sure," he said quietly, "the town will support you." Caleb nodded with certainty he hadn't felt in years. "I'm sure." At that moment, the cold morning seemed to warm itself. The twins slept with peaceful smiles, as if sensing that something important had just been decided, something good, something gentle, something full of promise. And the townspeople watched with hearts full of hope as Caleb stood there holding two tiny lives, ready to give them a home they had never known. When Caleb said he would take the twins home, the crowd felt a quiet wave of relief wash over them, as though they had all been holding their breath at the same time. People exchanged soft smiles, some hopeful, some emotional, and some simply amazed that a man who had arrived in their town only the night before was now stepping forward with such a calm, steady heart. But not everyone understood the moment right away. A few people at the back of the crowd had just arrived and didn't know the full story. They whispered to one another, trying to catch up. A merchant who had been traveling through town stopped near the group and listened with interest. He wasn't unkind, but he was practical in a way that sometimes made him overlook the feelings of others. "So this traveler is taking the babies?" he asked in a curious tone. "Does he even have a place to stay?" His question stirred a few murmurs. It wasn't meant to be unkind, just cautious. People wondered the same thing but had been too shy to ask. Caleb gently adjusted the twins in his arms, making sure their blankets covered them well. Their soft breaths tickled his chest, warming him more deeply than any coat could. Mrs. Harper stepped forward before Caleb answered. "He may not have much," she said kindly, "but he has a gentle heart, and sometimes that is what children need most." A few people nodded, touched by her words. The merchant, still unsure, said, "I only ask because raising even one baby is a big responsibility. Raising two, why, that's twice as much work, twice as much care, twice as many sleepless nights." His tone wasn't rude, only honest. Life in the frontier taught people to think carefully before taking on big tasks. Caleb remained calm. He wasn't offended. He understood the concern. Life, after all, had never been easy. But as he looked down at the twins resting peacefully in his arms, he felt a certainty that surprised even him. "I know it won't be simple," he said softly, "but I'm not afraid of hard work." His voice carried a quiet strength, the kind that didn't need to be loud to be believed. Mr. Dalton, standing nearby, studied him for a moment. "Do you have a place to stay, son?" he asked gently. Caleb nodded. "There's a small cabin on the edge of town," he said. "The owner rents it month to month. I stayed there last night. It could use a little fixing, but it's warm enough and there's room. With some help, I can make it better for the babies." A few people exchanged smiles. The cabin wasn't perfect, but it wasn't unsafe. And more importantly, Caleb seemed determined to make it a real home. One of the ranch hands stepped forward, rubbing the brim of his hat. "If you need wood for the fireplace, I've got plenty cut and stacked. I can bring some by later." Caleb nodded gratefully. "I'd appreciate that." Another woman from the crowd, a mother herself, spoke up. "I have extra blankets at home, soft ones. My children have outgrown them. I can bring those too." Caleb offered a warm smile. "Thank you." The bakery woman raised her hand cheerfully. "I'll send some warm milk later. Babies need warm milk." Slowly, the townspeople began to feel not just relieved, but united, like they were all sharing in something gentle and good. It wasn't just Caleb helping the twins. It was the whole town offering support. But even with this warmth spreading through the crowd, a few people still felt unsure. The merchant who had spoken earlier stepped closer and said, "It's a big step, sir. You're a traveler. Are you planning to stay here for a while?" Caleb looked down at May and Lynn, their tiny faces resting so peacefully against his coat. It was strange how a single moment, a single decision, could shift the course of a man's life. Just yesterday, he hadn't been sure where he would go next. Now he couldn't imagine leaving. "I think I've found my reason to stay," he said simply. His words carried a gentle certainty that eased the last bit of doubt. Something tender rose in the crowd. People whispered blessings under their breaths. A few mothers dabbed tears from their eyes, even Mr. Dalton, who usually reserved his emotions for private moments, wiped at his mouth to hide a smile. Still, Caleb had one concern of his own. "I want to do this right," he said. "I want to know the town supports this decision." Mr. Dalton stepped forward with a steady nod. "We do," he said firmly. "We all want the best for those babies. If you're willing to give them a home, then we're willing to help you." Caleb felt a warmth blooming in his chest. He hadn't expected such kindness from strangers. He wasn't used to people trusting him so quickly. But the sincerity in their eyes was unmistakable. Mrs. Harper gently touched one of the twins' blankets. "You have a very calm way about you," she said softly. "Children can sense kindness. They respond to it naturally." As if responding to her words, Lynn gave a tiny sigh in her sleep, her small fingers curling around a fold in Caleb's coat. The moment felt peaceful, almost magical. Still, some practical matters remained. Mr. Dalton cleared his throat, speaking in a gentle tone. "We should write down the children's names somewhere official, and we'll help you get what you need for them, clothes, blankets, milk." Caleb nodded gratefully. "That would help." The merchant, now more softened than before, stepped closer and offered something unexpected. "My wife sews baby clothes. We don't have children of our own, but she always keeps a few things ready for when neighbors need help. I can bring them to your cabin later." Caleb smiled warmly. "Thank you." The feeling of togetherness, of shared purpose, spread through the crowd like soft firelight on a winter evening. It warmed more than fingers and cheeks, it warmed hearts. But even as this gentle support unfolded, there were still a few lingering questions. A young man from the back asked timidly, "Shouldn't we try to find the girls' parents? What if they come back looking for them?" The crowd grew quiet again, not out of fear, but out of uncertainty. Caleb looked thoughtful, not troubled. "If anyone comes looking for them," he said softly, "I'll be here. I won't hide them. I won't keep them from family. But until that day comes, they need care, they need warmth, and they need someone to hold them." Mrs. Harper nodded approvingly. "That's all anyone can do. Care for them until answers come." Everyone agreed. The crowd stayed gathered for a while longer, exchanging ideas, offering help, and making gentle plans. People brought small gifts, mittens, knitted socks, a spare baby bottle, a soft blanket made of wool. A few children even gave tiny toys made of carved wood, as if offering a piece of their own childhoods to the new little ones. All this time, Caleb stood quietly, holding May and Lynn close to him. The babies slept peacefully, two tiny blessings cradled in warm, strong arms. Eventually, the cold air began to thicken again, reminding everyone that the day was still winter. Mr. Dalton suggested they should let Caleb take the twins to the cabin soon, before the temperature dropped. Caleb nodded, preparing to leave. He shifted his arms gently, making sure the twins were snug. The crowd slowly parted, making a soft path for him to walk. As he began moving forward, people offered final words of encouragement. "You'll do fine. They're lucky girls. The town is here if you need anything." Caleb nodded at each person, grateful for their kindness. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, but something about this moment felt right, not uncomfortable, not overwhelming, just meaningful. Walking carefully through the snow, Caleb felt the gentle weight of the twins guiding his steps. Each breath he took felt fuller, lighter, as if the cold air had turned into something fresh and hopeful. May stirred slightly, her small hand brushing against his coat. He glanced down with a soft smile. "You're safe now," he whispered to her, "both of you." As he continued toward his cabin, the soft crunch of snow beneath his boots matched the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. The town behind him remained warm with whispers and hope, watching him leave with the two little girls who had brought everyone together on a Christmas morning they would never forget. The path ahead was uncertain, but Caleb didn't fear it. For the first time in his life, he wasn't walking alone, and that simple truth filled him with more strength than he had ever known. The walk from the docks to the edge of town was not a long one, but on that Christmas morning, it felt like a journey filled with meaning. Caleb walked slowly, not because the snow made the path slippery, but because he wanted to take his time. He wanted the moment to settle gently, the way soft snow settles on a quiet rooftop. May and Lynn rested peacefully in his arms, their tiny breaths warm against his chest. Every now and then, one of them made a small sound, a tiny sigh or a faint murmur, as if dreaming. Each sound felt like a soft promise, a reminder that these two lives were now connected with his. The town gradually faded behind him, though he could still feel the warm support of the people who had watched him leave. The snow-covered roofs, the flickering lanterns, and the faint smell of fresh bread from the bakery all lingered like a gentle farewell. And though he had spent only one night in this place before morning came, he felt strangely connected to it now, as though it had been waiting for him just as he had unknowingly been waiting for May and Lynn. When he reached the small cabin at the edge of the woods, he paused in front of the door. The cabin wasn't much. It was simple, built from sturdy logs and topped with a roof that had seen many winters. But to Caleb, it suddenly looked different, almost inviting. It was no longer a place to sleep for just one traveler. It could become a home, a real home. He gently shifted the twins so he could open the door. The cabin was still warm from the small fire he had lit earlier in the morning before stepping out. The soft orange glow flickered along the wooden walls, offering warmth and quiet comfort. Caleb stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. The cabin felt peaceful, with a small table near the window, a simple bed in the corner, and a chair beside the fireplace. It was not large, but there was enough room for the three of them. He walked to the chair beside the fire, sat down carefully, and adjusted the babies so they were close to the warmth. The fire crackled softly, filling the room with a gentle sound that blended perfectly with the calm breaths of the twins. Caleb looked down at their small faces and felt something melt within him. He had lived a long time without a real sense of belonging, drifting from place to place, doing work wherever he could find it. But now, as he watched May's little hand rest on Lynn's blanket, he felt anchored in a way he had never felt before. They looked so peaceful, wrapped in the borrowed blankets, their cheeks slightly pink from the warmth of the fire. He gently touched one of their small hands, amazed by how tiny and delicate it was. "You're safe now," he whispered again, more to himself than to them. "Both of you?" A soft knock sounded on the cabin door. Caleb looked up, surprised. He stood carefully, making sure not to disturb the babies, and opened the door. Standing outside was the ranch hand who had offered wood earlier. His arms were full of neatly chopped logs. "Thought you could use these," the man said with a friendly smile. Caleb nodded gratefully. "Thank you, come in, it's cold." But the man shook his head. "I won't stay, just wanted to help." He placed the wood down beside the door and added, "The whole town's behind you, Mercer. Anything you need, just ask." Caleb felt a warmth beyond the fire's reach. "I appreciate it," he said sincerely. As the ranch hand walked away, a few more townspeople arrived one by one, each bringing something small but meaningful. The bakery woman brought warm milk and soft bread, wrapped in cloth to keep it fresh. She left it with a gentle smile and wished him a blessed Christmas. Mrs. Harper brought a basket of little knitted socks and mittens she had made over the years. The merchant's wife sent a bundle of baby clothes sewn from soft fabric. Each gift felt like a thread weaving Caleb more firmly into the community. For someone who had spent so long drifting, it was almost overwhelming. But in a gentle way, like receiving warmth after standing in the cold for too long. After the last visitor left, the cabin became quiet again. Snow continued to fall outside, brushing softly against the windows. The fire glowed warmly, casting a soft light that danced across the wooden walls. Caleb sat back down, the twins resting against him as he fed them a little warm milk with careful patience. He had never fed a baby before, but somehow the moment felt natural. May opened her eyes halfway, staring up at him with sleepy curiosity. Lynn stretched her tiny fingers before closing her eyes again. He smiled softly at their little personalities already beginning to show. When both babies were fed and settled, Caleb rocked gently in the chair. He spoke quietly, almost like a father telling a bedtime story. "I don't know much about being someone's parent," he said softly, "but I do know how to keep someone safe, and I know how to care. We'll learn the rest together." The babies couldn't understand his words, but they seemed to understand the feeling behind them. One of them made a faint cooing sound, and Caleb's heart warmed. Later in the afternoon, the snow outside grew thicker, turning the world white and peaceful. The cabin, however, was filled with warmth. Caleb spent time arranging the little gifts people had brought, tiny socks here, soft blankets there, little clothes folded neatly on the table. He looked at the small space and realized it was already starting to feel fuller. Not cluttered, but complete. He took a moment to stand at the window, looking out at the snowy landscape. The sky was soft and gray, the trees lightly dusted with snow, and the path from the cabin to the town was faint but visible. As he stood there, he felt a sense of gratitude rise within him. Fate had brought him to this town at just the right moment. It had brought May and Lynn into his arms. It had given him something he hadn't realized he'd been searching for: purpose. When evening approached, Caleb lit a few lanterns and placed them around the room. The warm glow made the cabin look even cozier. He set up a makeshift bed for the twins beside his own. Two small baskets lined with layered blankets, placed close to each other so they could sleep side by side. As he gently placed them in their new little beds, he noticed how naturally they reached for one another, their hands almost instinctively touching. It warmed him deeply. He leaned down and whispered, "You'll always have each other." The night grew quiet. The fire crackled softly. Outside, the snow fell gently under the moonlight, turning the world into a peaceful painting. Caleb sat on the edge of his bed, watching the twins sleep. Their faces glowed softly under the lantern light. Their breaths were slow and even. Their tiny chests rose and fell in a peaceful rhythm, like music too soft to hear but easy to feel. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly, feeling a calmness he had never known before. His life had changed completely in just one morning, but it felt natural, right even. As he watched the twins, he felt something settle into his heart, gentle but strong. He understood now that home wasn't made of walls or roofs. Home was made of connection, care, and the quiet promise of tomorrow, and these two little ones had given him that. Before lying down to sleep, he whispered softly into the room, "I'll take you home. Not just today, not just tonight. Always." The words faded into the soft glow of the lanterns, but the promise lived deeply in the space, warm, true, and full of gentle hope. As the cabin grew quieter, the snow outside continued to fall, covering the world in peaceful white. Inside, the warmth of the fire and the tiny breaths of two little girls filled the room with a sense of belonging. And for the first time in a long time, Caleb did not feel like a traveler on an endless road. He felt like someone who had finally arrived exactly where he was meant to be.